Order, please. The honourable member for Mount Pearl South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, certainly a pleasure to stand in this honourable House today and make a few comments as it relates to Bill 1, an act respecting the public interest disclosure in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Mr. Speaker, I think that this is certainly the intent here of what's being brought forward. This is a great piece of legislation. Or I should say the intent of what's being brought forward, I think, is a good thing. I think it's something that certainly I would support. I'm sure my colleagues would support. I'm sure members of the third party would support. And certainly my colleagues have actually called for this legislation in the House Assembly numerous times over the last couple of years for sure. Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important to give employees the opportunity to speak, to give employees the opportunity to speak without reprisal. Mr. Speaker, I've come from private industry myself, and one of the things that we always tried to encourage, at least where I worked, and in my capacity, was to speak to employees on a regular basis, to let employees know that their opinion counts, to encourage employees to bring forth issues, to encourage employees to bring forth suggestions on how processes could be improved, how things could be changed for the better, and to be able to do so freely. And it makes all the sense in the world, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, because whatever type of industry or public body or whatever that we may speak of, whether it is in private industry or whether it is a public service, I think that most of us certainly would agree that it's the people that work within that company, the employees. I think it's the people that work within the public service, day in, day out, on the ground, doing the actual work. They know how the system works. They know how to, they know what works. They know what doesn't work. They know how to improve the system. And when things are going wrong, they generally know what is going wrong. They generally know the root cause as to what is going wrong, why it's going wrong, and quite often they have the solutions that they can bring forward to make it better. And I think that that's just good management practice, quite frankly, to have that type of a situation. So this is no different. This is no different, except we are applying it now to the public service. And certainly in the public service, you know, while there's certainly value, as I said, whether you're a manufacturer and you're producing widgets or whatever it is, there's a value. But when we're talking public service, we're talking about services that impact the day-to-day lives of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. We're talking about things such as healthcare. One of the most important fundamental services that we provide for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador is our healthcare system. And it is extremely important that our healthcare system is working efficiently, it's working properly, it's providing the best possible service that we reasonably can for the people. We also, when we think of the public service, we think of services such as education, the provision of education for our children from the time they're very young, kindergarten, right up and through till level 3, high school. We think of trade school, CNA, we think of Memorial University, and so on. And I think education is, or certainly ought to be, another huge priority for us as a province, as a people, to educate our society so that we can be productive and citizens, and so that we can grow our economy here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And there are many other services, many other programs which government provide through our day-to-day lives that affect us all, and it's important that these programs are delivered in the most effective way possible. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, in doing that, it is the employees that deliver that service, those services. It is the employees who know what the issues are and how to correct them. Whether that be in the healthcare system, whether that be nurses, whether that be LPNs, whether it be physicians, whether it be people who are operating our food services, maintenance of our facilities, and so on. Or in the education system, whether it be our teachers and our administrators and our student assistants and so on. People like home care workers who look after our sick and our elderly in their homes. And it is critical that they have the ability to speak freely about issues where they exist. And so what this piece of legislation is doing is giving them a vehicle to do just that. And that benefits not just the employees in that particular workplace, it benefits all the people here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And in that regard, I certainly do support it. Now, Mr. Speaker, that said, there are issues. There are issues that I have with this particular piece of legislation. There are issues I believe that my colleagues have with this particular piece of legislation. I suspect there are possibly issues that members of the third party may have with this piece of legislation, some of the details, because of course the devil is always in the details. We can all stand up here and talk tops of the trees and say, you know, in principle, this is a good thing. But until you get into the details, we really don't know if it's going to be as effective as we would want it to be. So one of the issues here, that I see at least, is no dual option. The fact that there is no dual option in this particular piece of legislation. And when we talk about dual option, of course, what I am saying here, is that under what's being proposed here, if an employee has a concern in their particular government department, if they have a concern, you know, at a particular hospital or facility, if they're in the healthcare system, if it's a teacher who has a concern with perhaps reorganization issues like we're seeing in Mount Pearl in their schools, whether it's a teacher who has an issue with, I don't know, let's say the no-zero policy, and I've talked to teachers who certainly have an issue with the no-zero policy and this whole concept of passing your assignment late, if it's a day late, if it's a week late, if it's 2 weeks late, that's fine, no accountability. There's teachers that would tell you, that I've spoken to at least, they have a big problem with that. And, but Mr. Speaker, getting back to the dual option piece, right now as it stands, if any of those people, any of those employees should have an issue, then they have to go directly to the citizen's representative. They have to go directly to the citizen's representative. And there is no internal mechanism in place to deal with any of their issues and any of their concerns. And I believe that's a mistake, Mr. Speaker. I know if you look at, for example, labor issues, and I know that labor issues will be treated separately under collective agreements and so on, but I'm just using it by way of example. If an employee has an issue in a unionized workforce, as pretty much all of our government offices are, well, they all are, I believe, they would file a grievance, and they would file that grievance with their supervisor. And then it would be up to their supervisor to meet with that particular employee to discuss the grievance, the concern, and to work with that employee to resolve that matter to the employee's satisfaction and so on. And that's step one. And then if that can't be achieved, they disagree or the supervisor is not willing to speak about it or whatever, then there's another level where they go to the manager or director or whatever of the department, and at a higher level to bring that complaint forward and try to resolve that issue. And in a lot of cases at that point in time other people get involved as well, as maybe HR people, people from the union and so on. And then if it can't get resolved, then it goes to arbitration. And that's a pretty effective system. What we're proposing here, while it's not a labor issue as would be on a grievance, if an employee has a concern with the particular operations of a department, with the particular operations of a school, with the particular operations of a healthcare facility, nursing home, whatever the case might be, rather than have a mechanism where that employee could, without fear of reprisal, go to the supervisor or the manager or director of the facility, whatever it may be, and try to work it out internally first, rather than have that, we're going to go directly to the citizens rep. And I believe that by doing that, we lose an opportunity for matters to get dealt with in a more efficient manner. I think a lot of cases, if somebody came forward to the, I'll say, director or manager, whatever it might be, and that person is actually interested in running an efficient operation, actually interested in doing things the right way, actually interested in what's in the best interest of not just the employees, but the facility and the people of which it serves, the citizens, and provided the fact that the issue being brought forth is not, as was termed, I think, frivolous and vexatious, then I would think that that manager or director would want to deal with it internally, get it dealt with as soon as possible, take the advice of the employee and resolve the matter. But there is no opportunity in this piece of legislation for that to happen. It's going to go directly to the citizens rep. So I think there's a lot of lost opportunity. And I think the other thing that could happen is now you could actually end up with the citizens rep, that office being perhaps, depending on the number of issues, flooded with complaints, in theory. And a lot of complaints that he or she need not have dealt with to begin with. So I think it would make all good sense in the world, from my perspective, to have that second step, to have that dual option whereby an employee who has a concern, a legitimate concern, that doesn't fall under labor relations and so on, or human rights or whatever, that falls under what we're trying to capture here, operational concerns, I think would make all the sense in the world for that person to be able to go to the director of that facility to try to solve it at that level first. Then if it doesn't get solved, then go to the citizens rep. The other issue I have, Mr. Speaker, is around this, the fact that it comes into effect on the date that this was passed, or that this gets passed. And I believe July 1st is the date that it's scheduled to be passed. And what that basically says is that if there are any issues legitimate issues, operational issues, issues which are having a negative impact on Newfoundlanders and Labradorians today, and I can think of some. I can think of a big one in the city of Mount Pearl. I can think about the school reorganization in the city of Mount Pearl. And as was indicated by my colleague from St. John's North, who did attend a public meeting I had, and I've had many conversations beyond that meeting with not just parents who have concerns, not just grandparents, not just students, but with teachers and with administrators. And these people have raised legitimate concerns, to my mind. They are the experts. Again, they are the experts in education. I'm not. They are. And they have raised with me what they view as very, very legitimate concerns over the Mount Pearl school reorganization, specifically raising issues around what is being proposed for Newtown Elementary and St. Peter's Elementary, where they're going to take 2 K-6 schools and they're going to turn St. Peter's into a K-3 and Newtown into a 4-6. They've raised numerous concerns with me about this K-3, 4-6 split. They've raised issues with me about the fact that St. Peter's Elementary has been chopped up into pieces over the years, jamming kids into every available space and losing their specialty teaching areas, like music rooms and lunch rooms and all, and doing music and gym class in the cafeteria. Now I'm hearing that the proposed solution, which to date the board says they're going to go ahead with, thanks to no support from the Minister of Education, by the way. Now we're seeing that Newtown Elementary, I've been told, is also going to be chopped up into pieces. And Mr. Speaker, I'm hearing people talk about relevance, and I'm talking, and I'm going to talk relevance.
Order,
Mr.
please.
Speaker.
Order, please.
And Mr. Speaker, it's funny. The member from Fortune Bay, Cape Lahoon, when I was over there, she never opened her mouth. Now she's a chatterbox. I don't know what it's all about. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, she should be worried about the roads in her district and not the schools in Mount Pearl. She got enough issues of her own. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, as I was saying before, I was so rudely heckled. Mr. Speaker, it is very relevant because these teachers, these administrators who are calling me, who I am talking to about these issues in Mount Pearl, in these schools, have told me, Paul, I wanted to be at that public meeting. Paul, I want to call that open line show. I feel like calling it open line show. Paul, I want to send emails to the minister, but guess what? I can't. I can't do it because I'm afraid for my job. And the member opposite might say it's nonsense. I say to the member from St. Mary's that is not nonsense. It is not nonsense. This is what these people have told me. They fear for their jobs. They fear for their jobs.
Order, please. Order, please.
And they shouldn't have to fear for their jobs. And unfortunately, because the date that's tied to this piece of legislation, because this date says basically is when it comes to effect, this kicks in July 1st, we can't go back. We can't go back to those teachers and administrators. They still can't have their say. And I think it was crafted this way intentionally. It's crafted this way intentionally so that the government over here could say on a go-forward basis, we're going to be open, we're going to be accountable, we're going to let employees spill the beans on some of these decisions, these poor decisions that are being made, but everything that we've done up till this date is off limits. We don't want whistleblowers. We don't want them. We don't want the teachers to whistleblow in the Mount Pearl system. We don't want people in the Department of Transportation and Works to whistleblow on the Humber Valley paving thing. I'm sure that there's some insight in that department if the people were allowed to actually speak. And God knows there's enough issues in healthcare that I'm sure employees have a lot to say about, but no, we can't say that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure.